Hello, my friend, and welcome to another rousing edition of TFU News and Views. I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner-operator, madman behind TFU.INFO, the website, the toy archive, this podcast, Transformers University podcast, and so much more. And I want to thank you for joining me for this episode today. And, with these news and views, I don't want to just cover the news of the week. We are going to talk a bit about off-topic stuff, things that are related. I might rant about a few things. There are plenty of great Transformers news podcasts, such as Radio Free Cybertron, so please make sure you check them out as well. They're friends of the show. Brian does a great job over there, and you should definitely give them a listen weekly to catch up with your news. And I listen to a lot of Transformers podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts in general, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the ones I do listen to. Actually, you know what? One of the things I heard on a podcast this week, and it's an older episode because I'm behind, but on ID10T, Chris Hardwick's podcast, he had a sit down with Rob Zombie and his wife, and I'm always in on the rock star interviews, particularly on podcasts, because it's a lot of fun for me. But, it's funny. He mentioned something about fandom, and this wasn't Rob Zombie, this was Chris Hardwick that mentioned it, and about fandom and reboots. And I felt like it applied to Transformers in a number of ways. And the thing he mentioned was about having a pet. And, you have a pet and you build these memories with it and you love it and, you spend part of your life with it. And then at some point, if it's a dog, for argument's sake, that pet dies. And then, you get a new pet and it's not like the old one. And it's almost like you don't kind of want it. You don't want it. But eventually you accept it for what it is. You find a way to fall in love with it. You build your own memories of it. And it becomes part of your life again. And, I think as Transformers fans, we kind of have gotten used to doing that with each subsequent iteration and reboot over the years. And it's funny, I think I kind of extrapolated it to my feelings on third party. Now, as many of you have listened to me on this program and others, I am not a fan of third party as a whole. I find it derivative and unoriginal. The fact that you cannot generally refer to a third-party toy without referencing the Hasbro-owned and created character or a similar toy is part of the reason why I can't stand third-party. Now, add-ons, I think, are different. I think add-ons are things that will allow you to enhance your experience with a previously existing toy. But overall, the people that swear by third party kind of do get under my skin. And the way I kind of started to look at third party, aside from one of those things that I was trying to think about why it was so popular, and it's, and not that I'm doing this news podcast weekly, but I get it. It's a way to fill a news cycle for a podcast a lot of the time when there's nothing official going on. But in reference to what I heard on ID10T, I started looking at this third-party thing in the context of that same thing of having a pet. Third-party is kind of the equivalent of taxidermy in that scenario. So when you have the pet that you love, that's the pet that you've created all these memories with, and it has loved you back, and it has given you something. And third party being like taxidermy, it's like, here's the thing that's kind of your pet. It's not really your pet. It sort of feels like your pet and looks like your pet. And it evokes a lot of those memories that you had of your pet. But it's not really going to love you back. It's not going to create new memories with you. It's not going to give you anything other than a feeling that something else gave you prior. And I don't know if that hits the nail on the head, but it's certainly one way of looking at third party the way I look at third party. Because what I find the worst thing about third party, and I don't mean to make this episode a rant about third party, I really don't, is that there's very little drive on both the creator end and on the buyer end to and then that's a catch-22 for the companies, and I say that in air quotes, to take this engineering, this skill in designing what look like fun toys to me, and creating a world around it. So they do half the work, whereas Hasbro has gone out and paid writers and artists to create these comics and cartoons and things like that. These third-party quote-unquote companies have left off half the equation, let Hasbro pay to do it for them. And that is my big issue, my big rant, and that is why I see it as taxidermy. But we will get into some official news. I will get off this rant. There is another rant coming. Trust me, I have it in my notes because we got some stuff in the news that I do want to talk about. But speaking of speaking of dead animals, what is a bump of chicken, and why are they making a Bumblebee figure? So I don't know if you saw this. The Japanese band Bump of Chicken. I want to know where that name comes from. I gave them a listen. They're a bit of a J-pop sounding band. Not really my thing. I really hope the name Bump of Chicken is similar to the origin of the band Korn's name. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm sorry, this is a G-rated podcast, you'll need to Google that on your own time. So they've put out this Bumblebee that is light blue. It's the Power of the Primes Bumblebee. Titan's Return Bumblebee. And it is in light blue, and it comes with a Titan Master of one of the band members, which is the Spike Titan Master, or the Daniel, spelled backwards, Titan Master from Titan's Return. It's a neat little toy. It was selling for 40,000 yen, which is about $40 American. I've seen it on eBay right now for about $140. Let's hope that comes down, because that's a neat little recolor. Some of you can just imagine it as Botcon Glyph, and it'd be kind of fun to see that. And speaking of music tie-ins, this isn't the first one we've had. Linkin Park Soundwave is one, and this isn't the most recent one either, because just today, the mainly shoe based website network, NTWRK, they have an app. They do product drops where they drop products and sell them for a severely limited time. They did this with Transformers, I think, for some sort of San Diego Comic-Con exclusive post convention, as kind of a way to get a few of them out there ahead of time. They are doing a Def Jam version of the Super 7 3 3/4 inch Soundwave figure that is not out yet, but on pre-order. I really dig this. It comes in like a cassette-shaped card, and it's from Def Jam Records. It's an all gray, kind of black and white Soundwave almost. He's gray with some colored details. I'm going to try to pick this up. It's $35. It goes on sale tonight, which means it'll be before I post this episode. So find me on Twitter to see if I actually got it, but I downloaded the app. I have the notification ready. It goes up at 8 o'clock tonight, and I am all ready to do this. Now, speaking of things I'm all ready to do, this weekend, another thing coming up, and I want to just give you the heads up. I am going to NJ ToyCon in Parsippany, New Jersey. It's one of my favorite conventions to go to. It is every 6 months. A lot of toys, a lot of things to just kind of gawk at. So I will be tweeting out photos live on the Twitter at TFU_info. I don't think I'll be doing any interviews. I might. We'll see. But there's never really a lot of guests there, and I tend to only run into a handful of people there that I know, and I usually have more fun at the convention. I don't really want to feel like I'm working. So we'll see, but I will definitely post out pictures of anything I purchase and any cool Transformer stuff I happen to see there. Now, we did have some convention news this past couple of weeks. MCM Comic-Con in London saw Hasbro release some information about upcoming BotBots figures, including the claw machine and what was the other thing? It was a gumball machine kind of setup, right? Of BotBots, Wave 4, Series 4. And then all of a sudden, these things showed up in stores. Not the claw machine version or anything else, but the single pack showed up in stores in Target in Los Angeles. And those are out, and we've gotten a list of the names. My particular favorite name is Blurry Murray, who turns into a pair of 3D glasses. We also got news out of that show of some new Cyberverse figures. The most important mention here is there will be a figure released of Clobber. And there was also a leaked figure, I don't know where this came from, I saw it on Twitter though, of Rack and Ruin coming in the Cyberverse line. Speaking of Cyberverse, I am now 9 episodes in of Season 2. What a good show. This show has improved so much from the beginning of Season 1. And Season 2, Season 1, I should say, started out kind of poorly. And you can check my Twitter. I was pretty hard on it until about episode 5. And that's really where it turned around, and it hasn't fallen back ever since. It's been a good show. The characters are fun and interesting. It's very G1 for a show that's not G1. It's kind of like the fanboy idealization of G1, and I'm not going to lie, that thought is not entirely my own. Shout out to Vangelis and Lady of Rec for the last episode, I heard at least, of WTF at TFW, because they did a great job breaking down Cyberverse so far. And I got to say, they, not that I didn't agree with them before, but they've made me agree with both of them more. Also nice to hear Amy, Lady of Rec, back on a podcast. I haven't heard her in a while, and she's always a good listen. So check out her show, the Underbase podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, in other Transformers fiction, IDW's Transformers Galaxies #2 came out just recently, and that's another fun read. Tyler Blazinski, for his lack of taste in baseball teams, does write a pretty good comic so far. It's a little... It's funny, for applauding Cyberverse for being really good at being G1 while not being G1. This is really good at being G1 while being really G1. I like it. I do like it. The Insecticons are introduced in this issue. It's more about them than the Constructicons, really. And we get a neat little story from Bombshell as he tries to manipulate the Constructicons. And the neat things here, without getting too into details, one, the Insecticons are a group of Transformers that just eat, much like in the cartoon, but they're pretty much like carrion. Like, they are the insects that eat the dead. It's gross and disturbing and really dark. But for some reason, I like it. And I like that Bombshell is manipulative without using his Cerebro shells. I won't get too further into what happens in that issue if you haven't read it, but go check it out. Now, speaking of comics, one thing I did try to catch up on when I was at New York Comic Con, we were the folks at Viz Media, and I didn't really get to nail down someone there. They were promoting the Art of Transformers book edited by Jim Sorensen, but no one was there promoting the manga collection that's coming out. And it was just announced that the manga Volume 2 will be coming out later in 2020, alongside Volume 1, which will come out early 2020. And having read some of the early parts of this for the podcast for Transformers University, go check that episode out. It is so much fun. The manga is so weird and wacky. The Combaticons shoot a magical dog and kill it. It gives Powerglide more magical powers. It actually gives the Minibots magical powers to combine in vehicle mode. There is all sorts of weird stuff in that episode. Do check it out, and I can't wait to see the English translations of these books in print. And, speaking of comics, other things I have been reading these days. What have I been reading? I finished Bloodshot Reborn, which certainly seems like it is meant to be a predecessor to the upcoming film. Yeah, I know I rant about Valiant Comics. I haven't really read other comics, but I have been watching comic book-related TV. Watchmen on HBO. Oh my goodness, is this show good? I am not a huge fan of the Watchmen graphic novel from the 80s. I like it. I enjoyed it. I am not one to, swear by it. The movie I saw was good. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I'm not one to swear by it. The TV series is really freaking good. It is clearly set, at least by episode 3, you find out it is clearly set in the comic book continuity. So the ending that happened in the comic that was changed for the movie is the one that leads into the TV series. But the shot selection, the way things are laid out, it's just a beautiful show. It is intense and violent and hard hitting, and it feels like the original comic brought to life. If you haven't checked it, if you don't have HBO, do check that out. Also been watching The Walking Dead. Last episode was real weird. I will not get into spoilers, but there is a conversation with Negan and a boy he meets on the road that's really awkward. I don't know where the writers were really going with it, but it does not sit well. I feel like I need to not watch that scene ever again. I feel like whoever wrote it needs to register wherever they live. And it's a tough watch.
What? You've never heard of nut tapping? Seriously, with big old sausage fingers like those?
Now, while we're on the TV front, I have to reach out to the folks at the Toys That Made Us. Now, I worked on the Transformers episode of that show in season 2, but season 3 is coming, and I did get an email about a potential interview opportunity with Brian Volkweiss. And I want to know from you folks if you want to hear from him. So do me a favor, drop me a line, email, or on social media at TFU_info on Twitter and TFU.INFO just about everywhere else, and tell me if you want me to do another interview with him. We sat down with him once for season 2. I have availability to get him for season 3. They are doing Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers, among other things, this season. So if you want me to talk to him, drop me a line. Tell me, because I would happily get him on the phone. They're also doing a new series called The Movies That Made Us, season 1. I could probably talk to him a little bit about that. So jumping back to a few more Transformers-related bits of news. Dollar Tree has 4 Transformers bag clips. They're basically keychains that are on clips of Optimus, Megatron, Soundwave, and Bumblebee. I will be looking for those later today because I will be near a Dollar Tree in about an hour, so I'm going to totally check those out. I did pick up Walgreens exclusive Siege Ratchet, and what a nice toy. I haven't tried the weird repair bay mode yet, but I do like the fact that he is fairly well remolded from Ironhide and Crosshairs. And in fact, I took a bunch of pictures of them up on the Twitter and Instagram and Facebook accounts, and including one where I was able to make a kind of a bootleg combiner out of them, where Ironhide and Ratchet are the legs and Crosshairs is the upper body. And it's very much an Energon style combiner where Crosshairs' legs are these giant fists and his arms are kind of looped behind his head. And it was all using basically some of the accessories that came with the figures and 5mm ports. So please go check that out on the Instagram. Also posted pictures of Brunt because I finally got him opened up. I haven't put him in any of his weapon modes, but overall he's a nice toy. There's ways to make him really look like a Beast Machines figure. I was just goofing around with him. And put pictures of that too up, and you should check those out because it was a lot of fun. He could totally be a Jetstorm or a Thrust from Beast Machines, just with a few part swaps. Now, one of the other things not really covered lately in Transformers news sites, something I saw on Twitter and then sent over to my friends over at TF Wiki, is that there was a YouTube video from a show called Articulated Points, and they got a hold of a 1986 or 85 Takara Chronoform watch preview booklet, something for the salespeople, and in there was a Transformer that we never knew about. So it was a watch bot, one of the Chronoform transforming watches called Maxi Trek, and I don't know if it ever came out, but there's artwork and box art and box mock-up for it, and it was it had some sort of automated gimmick where if you put it in robot mode, it walked across the table. Do check that out. Search Articulated Points Chronoform on YouTube, and I'm sure it'll probably come up, and that's Kronoform for Chronoform. Now, I think that covers just about everything Transformers related I wanted to talk about. I did want to talk about one other thing, and this is toy related, so it's Transformers adjacent, that I just wanted to rant a little bit about. And there's recent news, and it's been trickling out over the last few months, about Toys R Us reopening. one of which is going to be a location in Paramus, New Jersey. Now, I pass through Paramus, New Jersey on my way to work just about every day. It's a big mall area. It's kind of where it's going to be located is in the mall, from what I hear, and it's going to be where two kind of major roads intersect at Paramus Park Mall. Now, there used to be a Toys R Us actually right over there. It's now a furniture store. Now, I was talking with a friend and someone I know who used to work for Toys R Us corporate and was affected by the layoffs. And having a lot of friends who live in New Jersey and people who work and live in New Jersey, and as someone who works in New Jersey, Toys R Us was a big presence in the middle of the state. And so the reverberations of the bankruptcy were felt around this area. So I was talking with someone I know who was a little closer to the Toys R Us situation than most people are. And I was talking with her about what she thought of the store reopening. And she gave me a little bit of perspective on, one, who was running it, and two, what they did in the final days. Now, apparently, the same people that basically ran Toys R Us into the ground are still running the new version, TRU Kids or whatever they're called. And I think it's an important point here that the chances of Toys R Us working with some of the larger toy companies, the toy manufacturers like Hasbro and Mattel and Disney and Lego, the chances they're going to work with Toys R Us again is very slim, if not non-existent. Why? Let's face it, after the bankruptcy, Toys R Us left them holding the bag, and all those companies lost money because Toys R Us, when they knew they were losing money, were putting in purchase orders and restocking their stores and refilling their warehouses, even though they knew they were going to go under and never pay for that stuff. So with that in perspective, right? What is going to be in those Toys R Us stores? What is going to be there to experience as part of that? It's going to be their in-house brands. The I forget what they're called. Was it Little Tykes and a bunch of the brands for newborns and infants and toddlers? Those are the brands you're going to see at these new Toys R Us stores, at these TRU Kids stores. You're not going to see Transformers or Star Wars or Marvel from Hasbro. You're not going to see the Mattel stuff like Barbie and He-Man and Hot Wheels. You're not going to see Lego at these stores. So while many of us are nostalgic for that vintage Toys R Us warehouse wall-to-wall experience, don't get your hopes up. Because from a business standpoint, if I ran a business, a large business, and got hit the way I did by Toys R Us going bankrupt, I'm not working with them. Now, if I was a small business, right, the small businesses that worked with them before, a lot of them went bankrupt because they were dependent on Toys R Us and their purchase orders that they never paid for because they went bankrupt. Other small toy manufacturers and distributors, some might jump at the chance for the distribution opportunity, but right now with just a handful of stores at the end of 2019, not many are going to do that, and I don't know if many are going to trust the leadership over at Toys R Us. So that is my perspective and strictly my opinion, based on conversations I've had with people that used to work for the company. All right, but let's move on to some brighter things. A couple of things I've been listening to. As I mentioned, I like the rock interviews. Talk Is Jericho, I caught a great episode on the 30th anniversary of the first Skid Row record. I forgot how good that record is. And there was an interview with Rachel Bolan and Dave Snake Sabo, and they really did go into a lot of the detail. And speaking of New Jersey, right, because they are from New Jersey, and how, oddly enough, John Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora were big influences on that record, because one of them, I forget who, lived across the street from John Bon Jovi growing up. And it's a great listen. You should give it a listen. I went back and listened to that record, and I found one of those things that I find always interesting in songcraft and in music craft is when someone takes a word that is one syllable and turns it into a word that is two syllables. Because one, if you ever see a song like that at karaoke, people always screw it up, and because they're reading and not singing. And two, it's always just fun to hear how you could take something as simple as the word fix and turn it into a two-syllable word. And that there's a chorus on one of the Skid Row songs, and it's I need a fix of rock and roll, but he sings, I need a fix of rock and roll. So it's it's silly and stupid, but I find that stuff incredibly amusing. And the other thing, listening to the metal podcast, Jamie Josta on the Josta Show interviewed Rob Flynn from Machine Head, and it's an interesting tour that I don't know if I'm going to make it to. I've seen Machine Head so many times, but I haven't seen them recently enough to see the songs from their newer records that I really like. And they're doing a great little thing where it's like an evening with. They've gotten two of the original members back in the band for part of this tour, and what they're doing is they're doing a show for about an hour and a half with their current lineup, which I don't know who any of the guys are other than Rob Flynn, the lead singer and guitar player. And then they're switching out, taking a break. They're playing everything in that first show from, they're playing an entire set of songs from their second album to their most recent album. And then they're swapping out band members in the break. They're bringing back the original drummer, the original lead guitar player, but the current bassist, and playing another 45 minutes to an hour. And they're playing the whole first record front to back. And it's just a neat kind of tour thing that I've never seen before, where it's basically, 2, 4, 6 members of the same band, but 2 people leave and 2 come back. And they play an entire different era of their music. So if the Machine Head tour comes your way and that's your kind of thing, if you like Machine Head as much as I do suggest checking it out. Shows are in February, I think. I might be swamped with Toy Fair coverage to catch that. But now, once again, I will be at NJ ToyCon this weekend in Parsippany, New Jersey. So if you happen to hear my voice and recognize it, please stop me. Someone did that to me at New York Comic Con after the Transformers panel. I got to give that guy a shout out. I don't know your name, but thank you for stopping me and telling me how much you like the show. That totally made my morning, and it was a busy morning, but that memory kind of stuck with me, and I don't think I mentioned it here, and that was so freaking cool. Now, if you want to keep up with the show, you know how to do it. Twitter is the best way, at TFU_info. And if you want to help the show, join our Patreon, patreon.com/TFU.INFO. I won't hit you with all the other stuff. If you're a regular listener, you know it. If you don't know it, it's in the show notes. Links to everywhere you need to be. And don't forget, Black Friday's coming up. So you want to follow our other Twitter account, at TFDeals. I will be tweeting out all the latest deals from Amazon, eBay, and more as I find them, especially with Black Friday and Cyber Monday coming. So you want to keep an eye on that. So that will wrap things up for this episode of TFU News and Views. Once again, I am your host, Anthony Brucali. Until next time, see ya.